You walked into a room feeling certain of what you wanted. You had a clear opinion, a firm boundary, maybe even a plan you were proud of. And then someone spoke. They didn't yell. They didn't threaten you. They simply talked, asked questions, reframed things, and within minutes you found yourself agreeing to something you never intended to agree to. You left that conversation confused, maybe even apologizing. And hours later, alone, you realized your original position was perfectly reasonable all along. If that has ever happened to you, this is the episode you need to hear. Because what took place in that conversation was not a fair exchange of ideas. It was a specific pattern of influence designed to move you away from your own position without you ever noticing the mechanism at work. The cost of missing this pattern is not just a single lost argument. It is cumulative. When someone repeatedly redirects your decisions, reframes your reality, and positions themselves as the authority on what is reasonable, you begin to lose something far more valuable than any single choice. You lose trust in your own perception. You start second-guessing yourself before you even open your mouth. Over weeks, over months, you become someone who hesitates where you once had clarity. And the person doing this rarely looks like a villain. They often look calm, composed, even caring. They may genuinely believe they are helping you see things more clearly. That is what makes coercive influence so difficult to detect. It operates beneath the surface of what we normally call communication. It wears the mask of reasonableness. Let's look at the mechanism. In political science and social psychology, power is understood as the ability to influence or direct the actions, beliefs, or conduct of others. That definition comes from decades of academic research into social and political dynamics. But here is what most people miss. Power does not exclusively refer to the threat or use of force. It may also be exerted through diffuse means. That phrase is critical. Diffuse means. It tells us that influence can be distributed so subtly across a conversation, a relationship, or a social structure that the person being influenced never identifies a single moment where they were coerced. There is no smoking gun. There is no raised voice, no ultimatum, no visible aggression, and yet the outcome shifted entirely in one person's favor, again and again and again. This is not a fringe theory. This is foundational to how researchers understand power itself. The absence of visible force does not mean the absence of control. Let me give you 3 everyday scenarios so you can feel how this works from the inside. First scenario. You mention to a colleague that you are uncomfortable with a new task assignment. Instead of acknowledging your concern, they ask a series of questions. Are you sure you are not overthinking this? Have you considered that others have it harder? Do you think the team would respect someone who pushes back this early? None of those are commands. Each one is framed as concern or curiosity. But after 5 minutes, you withdraw your complaint. You feel selfish for raising it. Your discomfort has not been resolved. It has simply been redefined as a personal failing. Second scenario. You set a boundary with a family member. You say you cannot attend a gathering this weekend. Their response is not anger. It is quiet disappointment, followed by a story about how much they sacrificed for you growing up. They never say you must come. But the emotional weight they place on your absence makes your boundary feel like cruelty. You go. You resent it. And you cannot articulate exactly what happened because nothing overtly forceful was said. Your boundary did not survive contact with their framing. Third scenario. A partner consistently positions themselves as the rational one in every disagreement. When you express frustration, they remain calm and ask if you have considered that your reaction might be disproportionate. Over months, you stop bringing up concerns entirely, not because they told you to stop, but because the dynamic has trained you to see your own emotions as unreliable evidence. You have internalized their framing so deeply that you now police yourself on their behalf. Now here is the turn. What interrupts this pattern is not confrontation. It is not matching their energy or proving them wrong in some dramatic moment. What interrupts it is an internal shift. It is the moment you stop evaluating whether their response sounds reasonable and start asking a different question entirely. What did I want before this conversation started? If my position changed, can I trace the specific new information that changed it? Or did it change purely because of pressure, framing, and emotional weight with no actual new evidence introduced? That distinction between being persuaded by new evidence and being pressured by emotional architecture is the single most important boundary you can learn to draw inside your own mind. One respects your intelligence, the other bypasses it. Here is your defense. First, notice the pattern of outcomes. If one person consistently gets their way and the other consistently abandons their positions, that asymmetry is data. It is meaningful information. Write it down. Keep a private record of what you wanted going in and what you agreed to coming out. The gap between those two things, over time, tells you more than any single conversation can. Second, delay your response. When you feel your position dissolving in real time, that urgency you feel to agree immediately is itself a signal. You are allowed to say, "Let me think about that," and leave the conversation. A person who respects your autonomy will not punish you for pausing. A person who escalates pressure when you ask for time is telling you something important about the dynamic. Third, name the structure, not the content. You do not need to win the argument. You can simply say, "I notice that when I raise a concern, the conversation shifts to whether my concern is valid rather than addressing the concern itself." That sentence does not attack anyone. It describes a pattern. And describing a pattern out loud often changes it because it removes the invisibility that the pattern depends on. Fourth, seek outside perspective from someone who has no stake in the dynamic. Not to recruit allies or build a case, but to hear your own story reflected back without the distortion field of the relationship surrounding it. Fifth, if the pattern is persistent and you feel your sense of reality deteriorating, seek professional support. A trained therapist can help you rebuild trust in your own perception, which is often the first thing lost in a coercive dynamic and the hardest thing to restore alone. Now let me zoom out because context matters deeply here. One instance of someone being persuasive does not mean they are coercive. People influence each other in every interaction. Psychology, as an academic discipline, studies the full range of human behavior, including both conscious and unconscious processes, thoughts, feelings, and motives. Influence itself is neutral. It is part of how humans navigate the world together. What makes a pattern harmful is the consistent asymmetry of outcome, the erosion of one person's autonomy, and the absence of genuine reciprocity over time. Do not use anything you have heard today to diagnose someone in your life. A pattern of behavior is not a clinical label, and labeling someone can itself become a tool of control if used to dismiss them entirely rather than to protect yourself specifically. Remember that room you walked into at the beginning, the one where you had a clear position and lost it within minutes without understanding how. Now you have language for what happened. You can trace the structure. You know to check the gap between what you wanted and what you agreed to. You know to pause, to document, to name the pattern rather than fight the content. You know the difference between being genuinely persuaded and being quietly moved. So here is your closing question. The next time you leave a conversation feeling confused about what you originally wanted, will you pause long enough to check whether you were persuaded by real evidence or whether you were moved without your awareness by a structure you can now see clearly? This material is educational. It exists to help you recognize patterns of coercive influence and protect your autonomy. Use it to build awareness and set boundaries, never to control or harm another person. The Dark Mind Ledger. Understand the pattern. Protect yourself. This content is for educational and defensive purposes only. Understanding these tactics helps you recognize and protect yourself from manipulation. It is not intended to harm others